Now let's pretend we had a great interview. Everything went well. We're leaving the hospital or the specialty program or the dental school or whatever program we're applying to, or private practice. We talked a little bit about follow-up on the way in. Once you've met people, how do you follow up after the interview? What makes the most sense to do so you don't come across as being too needy or desperate, like you mentioned earlier, but gracious, thankful maybe?
I actually had a client who was declined a position because she followed up so quickly during the interview and so, overly zealously that it was almost a little bit embarrassing. She came in with a thank you note right after she interviewed. She lived down the road, and literally 5 minutes later she typed it and walked in and gave the interviewer the note. And that just kind of unfortunately cinched the hiring manager's decision. That just, unfortunately painted the full picture. She was a little overly aggressive during the interview, and then, so it's incredibly important to, I would say, within 24 to 48 hours, you can certainly follow up with a thank you note. Again, thoughtfully laid out, constructed thank you note that shows the points of the interviewer, the interview, and really demonstrates that you've been listening to aspects of what the interviewer imparted. I mean, I just think it's incredibly important to look at, what points of reference, and you can certainly take notes, brief notes during the interview to make sure that you've been able to retain the information, but to be able to then take that back, chew on it a little bit, maybe even review your notes before you just decide to, kind of quickly flick off a letter. You may not want to just rattle something off. You might want to give it some thought, but definitely looking at specifics about that interview that you want to bring out and specifics of your strengths. I think it's on the other side, not only the questions that were posed, but what did you omit during the interview, or what did you forget to mention? So that's vital to look at, was there something that you felt you didn't really get the point across on? You need to clarify a little bit. So if you don't feel like you were particularly cogent in one area, you can always cover that in the thank you note briefly. Keep it brief. I wouldn't say, you don't want a letter that's, a page and a half long, but you want to look at key points. You want to look at what they were looking for in a candidate and try to reiterate some of those points and some of the strengths you possess. And you might want to think of creative ways to thank a person that you've met with. It might be some small token of your appreciation that relates to their interests or their hobby or whatever you would like to generate, but really look into what makes them tick, learn what makes people tick, and I think take the time and investment in each person, again, as we mentioned, that you come in contact with, but look at the art of follow-up. And almost all of my job candidates that I work with, follow up. I teach them how to conscientiously follow up with each employer that they're working with, and how to put unique things into their thank you notes. It just shouldn't be the generic kind of, quickly typed off, just stuffed in an envelope kind of thing. You don't want to do a form letter, but you really want to give it thought, give your appreciation thought.
So use that information that you work so hard to get about the company, about the individuals that you know. And don't do something generic. Really
put some time and thought and effort into it. Absolutely. Really pays off. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So that's one part of it, the thank you note. The other part of it is I would say definitely following up, again, maybe in a week to a week and a half with a phone call. If they say it's going to take about a week or so to sift through candidates and weed out prospects, you're going to really want to allow them that screening process. You don't want to follow up too soon, again, even with the phone call. But a nice, polite kind of practice of a phone call, I think, is perfectly fine. And even looking at, if they, one thing that I will ask them to do at the very end of an interview, and you can certainly follow up with this, is ask them if they've had any questions, if there's something that they haven't clarified, you haven't clarified during the interview. So is there a point you haven't clarified? Is there something that they have a question about? Always important, because when the interviewer is interviewing a candidate, they may have questions in their mind and they've forgotten them, or they don't have the time to ask, or what have you, or they're not taking the time. And so if there's a point they need to clarify, it's really important, they need clarification on, it's important to do that. So I would say follow-up is it's vital in every step of the process, but especially after the interview. You have to do what you can. Try to think if there's